If you guys are buying a guitar for the first time, you need to check out this video before you do. You're not going to want to miss this. I say that because there's a ton of information about guitars that many of you guys don't understand going into buying your first instrument. It takes a lot of time and experience to develop a taste for exactly what you want in an instrument, and typically your first instrument is usually your worst instrument. Now, I say that a lot of guitars are really well made, but a lot of times the guitars you buy for the very first time are usually ones you buy because of a certain coolness factor or a marketing ploy that was used on you. I'm going to help give you guys some great tools picking out an objectively really great first-time guitar, specifically electric guitars. So typically when you buy your first guitar, you are berated with a ton of information regarding what brand and what style to pick. But here's some things I want to clear up for you guys to keep in mind when you're buying one. First off, there's only really 3 types of guitar. Many guitar manufacturers base their models off of these 3 types. So if you pick one of these guitars, you're not going to go wrong. You've got a Stratocaster made by Fender, a Telecaster made by Fender, and a Les Paul made by Gibson. Now, there are offshoots of these guitars all across the spectrum from Jaguars to SGs, but we're going to go into deep down what makes these guitars different from one another to help you guys give you an idea of what to look for in buying one. So typically, Telecasters are going to be the most simple of the guitar family. I've got one right here. This here is a Squier Telecaster. They are the simplest of guitars because they don't have a lot of stuff going for them. We've got an alder body stapled on to a bolt to neck, and typically the necks will run maple on the back, and then on the front, which is the fretboard, it's going to be a rosewood. For a lot of lower end guitars, the rosewood are replaced with pau ferro. That's a Brazilian kind of wood, and they're similar in feel, but pau ferro is going to be a little bit lighter and not as dense as rosewood. The reason why we're seeing more pau ferro fretboards in the guitar world is because rosewood, it's getting harder and harder to obtain, whether through shipping prices or tariffs or taxation, all that jazz, or even scarcity of the actual wood itself. Rosewood is getting harder and harder to obtain. So you'll see a lot of pau ferro fingerboards because they're cheaper and really easy to handle. And then of course we've got an alder body. Alder is sourced here in the USA. Earlier guitars were made of ash, but nowadays alder is the go-to. So in most, if not all, Stratocaster to Tele style guitars, you're going to have a combination of alder, maple, and either rosewood or pau ferro. And the reason why the Telecaster is so cool is because the Telecaster, as I said, pretty simple. There's not much going on with the Tele. It's got 2 pickups, single coils, and a 3-way tone switch, and it's really easy to manipulate in the field. And Telecasters, because they're simple, they don't have anything fancy like floating tremolos or crazy vibrato arms, and that makes tuning stability really easy to maintain on a Telecaster. So for anybody, a Telecaster is a great starting guitar. Strats are another great instrument that belong in our set of 3. Strats are really diverse. They are played in a lot of different kinds of music. Once again, you can't really go wrong with buying a Strat. Typically, they're just like the Teles in that they're made of alder, typically have a maple neck with a rosewood fretboard, although there is some customizability with what Strat you want to buy. Then finally, we have the Les Paul guitar from Gibson. They are going to be way different than any of the other guitars we've talked about here. Les Paul guitars are made of mahogany, typically with a maple cap over the top of the Les Paul. Because the Les Paul is made of mahogany and has that maple cap, it is going to be a lot warmer than a lot of Strats you find. And the humbuckers on the Gibson do play into that sound type. Typically, you'll find guitars like Les Pauls being used in all kinds of styles, but typically you'll find them in jazz and hard rock. Now, here are some things I'd keep in mind when buying my very first electric guitar. The first tip I give you guys is that not all guitars hold their tune equally, and that's a pretty big deal when you're first starting out. When you buy a guitar from a brick and mortar music store like Guitar Center or your local music shop, those guitars are not always in a environmentally controlled area, and a lot of the tuning stability issues is not just from the environment, but also mechanical. So for example, if you buy a Les Paul style guitar, Les Pauls are notoriously known for going out of tune because of the way the headstock is curved at the neck. The break angles don't exactly give it a whole lot of great tuning stability, and a lot of people for a first time guitar don't usually get Les Pauls because of that issue. So the Les Paul guitars, if you want to buy a Les Paul, you're going to have to buy a nicer Les Paul than you would a Strat or a Tele because of the way the break angles work on a Les Paul. But when it comes to tuning stability, the Telecaster is going to be the guitar to get because the bridge is fixed, meaning that it's planted on the actual body itself. You're not going to have any issues with tuning from a Telecaster style guitar. However, you're going to want to play the crap out of the guitar just to make sure you don't have any issues foreseeable down the road. The Strats will be a little bit less stable in tuning only because a lot of Strats, when you buy a Strat with a tremolo arm, the bridges are floating. So you're actually not bolted to the actual body like a Telecaster bridge is. So Strats typically tend to go out of tune a little bit more than Teles. But if you buy a nicer Strat, you're not going to have any issue whatsoever. But test those things out before you buy. It's really important that your guitar stays in tune. So when you're buying your first electric guitar, I'd also recommend not buying a guitar that's too expensive or too cheap either. Typically, the range I want to see you guys buy a new guitar at is around the $200 to $300 range. That's just enough to get your feet wet in the realm of buying guitars because a whole lot of guitars don't have the same issues within price ranges. So another common issue I find with guys buying their first guitar is typically they'll buy the guitar that looks the coolest and not the guitar that plays the best. And so a lot of you guys are rockers and metalheads, I know, but the answer is not buying a BC Rich or a Schecter style guitar. I will say for a lot of reasons that shouldn't be your first guitar that you buy, but you can get great metal tones coming from an actual Strat or a Telecaster even. When you buy a guitar in a niche like a BC Rich or a Schecter, one, there's not a lot of resaleability. So a lot of people aren't going to buy a BC Rich or a Schecter back from you if you decide to sell one on the market. I'm sure you can find somebody somewhere, but you want to buy a guitar that you're willing to maybe trade with down the road, or a guitar that actually will sound good over the length of time. I will say BC Rich guitars and Schecter guitars, if you buy them Chinese made, they'll be okay, but over time, they're not going to last. Whereas you can buy a nice Fender Squier, and it's going to work just fine for you. Another tip I give you guys is to know exactly what kind of budget you're going to have going into buying a guitar, okay? A lot of people, they will say, I want this kind of guitar, and then you'll get upsold at the shop for a guitar that sounds or feels maybe a little bit better. So if your guitar budget is $200, then by golly, stick to $200. If it's $300, stick at $300. Don't go too much above or below your budget threshold. You're going to end up getting oversold on simple things that weren't worth it. Like, for example, you got like stainless steel frets instead of nickel frets, and that's a huge upcharge for some odd reason. Stainless steel's, stupid guitar people. You don't want to get sold on some signature series guitar that they upcharge the actual cost of the guitar just because some guy's name is on it. Don't get upsold. Buy a guitar manufacturer. We know what you're going to buy and go for it. Another tip I'd recommend for buying your first or maybe your fourth guitar as well is just to go into the store multiple times and try the same guitar. It's easy when you're going in to buy a guitar that you're just like, there's a lot of like information overload going in your mind that's going to overload your ability to make an objective decision on a pretty significant investment in your sound. So I'd recommend if you're going to go into a guitar store to buy, don't buy a guitar until the second or third time you go into the guitar store. You may go into a guitar store and sit down, and the first time you're just overwhelmed by everything. You have the temptation just to buy it on the spot, but don't do that. Take a look at the guitar objectively, write down what you can about it, go home, think about it a little bit, sleep on it, and then come back to the store and say, I've realized that when I play this guitar, it's not as cool as I thought it was going to be. I might want to try a different model. Guitar Center and some of these music stores have a way of really just overloading you with incredible walls of guitars, of things you've never even dreamed of buying, and a lot of people panic and just buy the first thing they see that is cool to them. And that's not the best idea when trying to buy a great guitar. So when you decide to go in multiple times, get an objective idea of what guitar you want beforehand, so when you go inside, you go in a couple times, get rid of that nervousness, those butterflies, and eventually you'll come out with a guitar that you're really confident in. And that's the key. You want a guitar you feel confident in. Guys, thanks so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing. I make videos all the time, all about guitar stuff. And if you want to know more about buying guitars, maybe a little bit deeper, let me know in my Instagram, @IkeGuitar. I'll answer your questions there. And also, if you have a guitar that you love, that's not one of the ones I mentioned, let the people know in the comments below what kind of guitars you're playing right now. They're in a great budget range for a first-time player. And guys, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time, and have a great day picking out guitars.